Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight we come to the final labor of Hercules, the 12th and most daunting task of all. Our hero has traveled to the ends of the earth, faced monsters and beasts beyond counting, and now stands at the threshold of a journey no living mortal should make. This is the story of Hercules and Cerberus, the Hound of Hades, guardian of the Underworld. The years had changed Hercules. Each labor had carved away at him, stripping away pride and replacing it with something quieter, something deeper. He had cleaned the Augean stables in a single day. He had captured the golden hind of Artemis without shedding a drop of its blood. He had brought back the girdle of Hippolyta, the cattle of Geryon, and the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. 11 impossible tasks, each one completed. And yet King Eurystheus, his cousin and tormentor, had saved the most terrible labor for last. "Bring me Cerberus," the king had commanded. "Bring me the three-headed dog that guards the gates of the dead. Not a pelt, not a trophy, but the living beast itself, dragged from the shadows of Hades' realm and delivered to the palace at Turin's. And you must take him without weapons," Eurystheus had added with a cruel smile. "You must use only your hands." It was a command meant to be impossible. A task designed not just to test Hercules, but to destroy him. For what living man could descend into the land of the dead and return? What mortal strength could overcome the guardian that had stood at those gates since the beginning of time? Hercules stood now on a windswept plain in the far south of Greece, near the Cape of Taenarum. Here, the locals whispered, there was a cave. And that cave led downward, ever downward into the earth itself. It was one of the hidden entrances to the underworld, a place where the boundary between life and death grew thin as morning mist. The hero did not enter immediately. He had learned through all his labors the value of preparation. He had learned to seek guidance from those wiser than himself. And so he traveled first to Eleusis, to the sacred mysteries, where he was initiated into the ancient rites. The priests there taught him the prayers and purifications that might protect a living soul in the realm of the dead. They prepared him as best they could, though their eyes held sadness, for they did not expect to see him again. Then Hercules sought out Athena and Hermes, for these two gods alone could guide a mortal through the shadowed paths below. Athena came to him in the quiet of an olive grove, her gray eyes solemn. Hermes appeared at dusk, his traveler's staff in hand, for he was the guide of souls, the one who led the dead to their final home. "I will go with you," Hermes said. "I know the roads beneath the earth. I know the rivers and the gates. But understand, Hercules, that the underworld is not like the world above. It is a place of shadows and memory. What you see there may trouble you. The dead do not forget and they do not forgive." Hercules nodded. He had made peace with what he must do, or perhaps he had simply grown too tired to be afraid. They descended together into the cave at Taenarum. At first it was merely a rocky passage, damp and close, smelling of earth and stone. But as they went deeper, the walls seemed to grow less solid, more uncertain. The darkness took on weight and texture. The air became cold, not with the chill of winter but with an absence of warmth, as if heat itself could not exist in this place. Down and down they went, following paths that twisted and turned. Time lost meaning. There was no sun here to mark the hours, no stars to guide the way. There was only the steady downward slope and the soft footfalls of Hermes ahead, his staff glowing with a pale light that barely touched the darkness. They came at last to the river Styx, the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The water was black and still, reflecting nothing. On the shore waited Charon, the ferryman, ancient beyond reckoning, his face hidden deep within his hood. Charon looked at Hercules with eyes like cold coals. "You are alive," he said, and his voice was dry as old parchment. "The living do not cross." But Hermes stepped forward. "He carries the favor of the gods," the messenger said. "He comes with purpose, not to stay but to complete a task and return. Will you deny him passage?" For a long moment Charon was silent. Then, slowly, he gestured to his boat. "The price is the same for living or dead," he said. "1 coin for the crossing." Hercules placed the coin beneath his tongue, as the initiated at Eleusis had instructed him. He stepped into the boat and it rocked gently beneath his weight. Charon pushed off from the shore and they glided across the black water without sound, without wake, as if the boat moved through something more than mere liquid. On the far shore, the landscape of the underworld spread before them. It was vast and gray, a twilight realm of endless plains and distant mountains. Pale forms drifted here and there, the shades of the dead, thin as smoke. They walked without purpose, remembering lives now gone, forever separated from the warmth and color of the world above. As Hercules walked through that gray land, he saw faces he recognized, warriors who had fallen in battles he had fought, friends from his youth, now silent shadows. They gathered around him, these ghosts, reaching out with insubstantial hands, their voices like wind through dry grass. One shade approached more boldly than the rest. It was Meleager, a hero Hercules had known in life who had died in tragedy. Meleager's ghost spoke of his sister Deianira, who still lived in the world above. "If you return," the shade said, "and if you seek a wife, remember her. She is kind and true." Hercules nodded slowly, filing the name away in his heart. He moved on through the fields of asphodel, where the ordinary dead wandered, those who had been neither especially virtuous nor especially wicked. Hermes guided him past the punishment grounds, where the wicked suffered their eternal torments, though Hercules caught glimpses of those distant agonies and looked quickly away. They came at last to the palace of Hades himself, a vast structure of black stone that rose from the gray earth like a mountain. Before its gates stood Cerberus. The great hound was larger than any living dog, larger than a lion, larger than the Nemean lion that Hercules had fought so long ago. It had 3 heads, each one massive and terrible, with jaws that could crush stone. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness. Its tail was a serpent, living and writhing. Along its back, more serpents grew like fur, hissing and snapping at the air. The beast saw Hercules and all 3 heads began to growl, a sound like distant thunder rolling across the plains of the dead. It had guarded these gates since the world was young. It had never been bested, never been moved. The dead it allowed to enter but never to leave. The living it simply destroyed. Hercules did not hesitate. He had not come so far to turn back now. He walked forward, straight toward the monster, and Cerberus lunged. The fight that followed was like nothing Hercules had experienced before. He had no weapons, no club, no sword, only his hands and his strength. Cerberus was not merely strong but relentless, tireless, 3 minds working as one. One head would strike while another pulled back, only to snap forward again from a different angle. The serpent tail lashed at his legs. The snakes along its back struck at his arms and shoulders. But Hercules had fought monsters before. He had learned patience. He had learned to read the patterns of his enemies, to find the rhythm in their attacks. He dodged and weaved, letting the hound's own fury work against it. When 2 heads lunged, he stepped aside and they collided with each other. When the serpent tail struck, he caught it and held firm, using it to pull himself closer to the beast's body. He got his arms around the great dog's neck, all 3 necks, squeezing with all his strength. Cerberus thrashed and twisted, its claws tearing at the earth, but Hercules held on. He had held the weight of the sky on his shoulders. He had wrestled with death itself in various forms. He would not let go. Slowly, gradually, the beast's struggles weakened. Not from injury, for Hercules took care not to truly harm the creature, but from exhaustion. The great heads began to droop. The growling faded to whimpers. And finally, with a sound almost like a sigh, Cerberus went limp in Hercules' grip. The doors of the palace opened. Hades himself emerged, the lord of the underworld, pale and terrible in his dark majesty. Beside him walked Persephone, the queen who spent half her days in this shadowed realm and half in the world above. "You have defeated my hound," Hades said, his voice echoing across the empty plain. For a long moment the god simply looked at Hercules, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "I will permit you to take Cerberus to the upper world, but on 3 conditions. First, you must bring him back unharmed when your task is complete. Second, you must use no weapons in his capture, which you have already honored. And third, you must carry him from this place by strength alone. No chains, no cage, no tricks. Hercules bowed his head. I accept your terms, Lord Hades. There was something else in the god's eyes then, something almost like respect. Few have the courage to come to my realm while still drawing breath, Hades said. Fewer still have the strength to stand before me and make demands with their actions. Complete your labor, son of Zeus. Return my hound, and you will be welcome in the world of light once more. And so Hercules lifted Cerberus onto his shoulders. The beast was heavy, heavier than anything he had carried before, heavier perhaps than it should have been, for it carried the weight of its duty, its eternal purpose. The three heads hung down, still dazed from the fight. The serpent tail coiled loosely around his waist. The journey back was long. Hermes guided him again, but this time the path seemed even more difficult. The weight of Cerberus pressed down on him. His muscles screamed. His bones ached. And worse than the physical burden was the spiritual weight of the underworld itself, the sorrow and the silence, the knowledge of all the death that had ever been and ever would be. When they finally reached the river Styx, Charon took one look at Hercules carrying Cerberus and actually smiled, a terrible expression on that ancient face. That is a sight I never thought to see, the ferryman said. The boat sat lower in the water with both Hercules and the great Hound aboard, but it did not sink. They crossed the Black River once more. They ascended the winding passages, and then, after what might have been hours or might have been days, Hercules saw ahead a tiny point of light. It grew as he climbed. It expanded and brightened. And then he was stepping out of the cave at Taenarum into the afternoon sun, and the light was so brilliant after the darkness below that he had to close his eyes against it. The warmth of the sun on his face felt like a blessing, like being born anew. Cerberus stirred on his shoulders, awakening more fully. The three heads lifted and looked around at the world of light, at the blue sky and green earth, at things the guardian of the dead had not seen in ages beyond counting. The Hound did not struggle, did not try to flee. It simply watched, as if curious about this strange realm so different from its home. Hercules carried Cerberus across Greece. People fled at the sight of them. Whole villages emptied. Livestock stampeded. But Hercules walked calmly on, the great Hound on his shoulders, until he came at last to Turin's and the palace of King Eurystheus. The king was in his throne room when Hercules arrived. Eurystheus looked up, saw the hero carrying the three-headed dog, and his face went white as death. He had never truly believed Hercules would succeed. He had sent the hero on these labors hoping each one would be the last, hoping finally to be rid of his rival. But Hercules had completed every task, and now he stood in the throne room calm and quiet with the guardian of the underworld on his shoulders. Eurystheus scrambled backward, nearly falling from his throne. He pointed with a shaking hand toward the door. Enough, he gasped. I have seen enough. Take the beast back. Take it back now. Your labors are complete. All 12 are finished. You are released from your service to me. Just take that monster away from here. Hercules nodded once. He turned and walked out of the palace, Cerberus still on his shoulders. He did not run. He did not hurry. He had given his word to Hades that he would return the great Hound unharmed, and he would honor that promise. The journey back to Taenarum was peaceful. Cerberus had grown calm, almost docile, as if it understood that Hercules meant it no harm, that this was merely a task to be completed, a duty fulfilled. When they reached the cave, Hercules descended once more into the earth, down the winding ways across the Black River, through the gray fields. At the gates of Hades' palace he gently set Cerberus down. The great Hound stood, shook itself, and the three heads turned to look at Hercules. For just a moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a mutual respect between beings who had tested each other's strength and found it worthy. Then Cerberus turned and walked back to its post. It settled down before the gates. Watchful once more, the eternal guardian resumed its eternal duty. Hades appeared in the doorway of his palace. You kept your word, the god said. The Hound is returned unharmed. Go now, Hercules, son of Zeus. Go back to the light. Your labors are complete. You have proven yourself worthy. Hercules bowed to the lord of the underworld and turned away. Hermes was waiting to guide him back. They ascended together through the darkness, and this time the journey seemed shorter, lighter. When Hercules emerged once more into the world of the living, he felt different, changed, as if something heavy had been lifted from him, something more than just the weight of the great Hound. The 12 labors were finished, all the impossible tasks completed, all the monsters faced and overcome. Hercules had descended into death itself and returned. There was nowhere else to send him, nothing else to ask of him. His service was ended. He stood in the sunlight, breathing the air of the living world, feeling the warmth on his skin. He thought of all he had done, all he had endured. He thought of the shades he had seen in the underworld, the countless dead who would never again feel the sun or taste the sweetness of wine or hear the laughter of friends. And he thought of Meleager's words about the woman named Deianira, and he wondered what life might hold for him now that the labors were done, now that he was finally free. But those are stories for another time, dear listener. Tonight we close the tale of the 12 labors with Hercules standing in the sunlight, victorious but changed, having touched the realm of death and returned to tell the tale. The greatest hero of Greece had completed the greatest tasks ever set before a mortal man. May you rest well tonight, and may your own journeys, whatever they may be, lead you safely home. Until we meet again, sleep peacefully.